So as I begin this morning, I want you to raise your hand if you've ever seen a verse from this morning's gospel reading on a bumper sticker or billboard. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that everyone who believes in him may not perish, but may have eternal life. Now, I know I can't literally see you, but I'm always feeling connected to you when I record my sermons. Seriously, you're very much in my heart and mind. So I always feel like you're hearing my words, even if you're hearing them at a slightly different time from when I'm saying them here in the nave. So right now, I'm imagining that quite a few of you are raising your hands, either literally or metaphorically, in response to my question. John 3:16 is one of the best-known verses in the Bible, and the one most likely to be posted on roadsides, painted on barns, at least in the place where I came from, or to be handed out by evangelizing college students on spring break, which this year we should all be praying they decide not to do. Perhaps one of the gifts of the coronavirus could be that it prevents overly simplistic presentations of the gospel from happening on quite so large a scale. Because here's the problem with that verse. This statement of Jesus may be one of the most frequently quoted, but it's also, I think, one of the most frequently misunderstood. And it's true on multiple levels. It's far too often taken out of context, and context matters, always in the Bible. And one way this is done is by separating it out from the verse that follows it. Indeed, God did not send the Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. I've never seen that part painted on the side of the barn, and I'm not sure that's just because it would be harder to fit. I think it's more because the Christians who hire those barn painters have turned it into more of a statement about individuals and their personal salvation than about God's love for all of the world that God created. As a reminder that God created the world in love and wants it to live in and by the love for which it was created. One problem with taking this verse and plopping it alone, all by itself, is because the people hearing it won't know why Jesus said it, what has prompted his remark. Unless I sound like I'm ragging here on college students who are on fire with their love for Christ and want to share it with the world, be assured I am not. God bless them. For a passionate relationship with the person of Jesus is actually what Jesus is talking about here. And college students are not the only ones tempted to make such mistakes. If you look at the New Revised Standard Version, in the context of the entire chapter, the editors make the same mistake. Both they and the editors of the King James Version plot this verse out all by itself, as if this one sentence is an entire paragraph unto itself, disconnected from what came before or after it. There's not a single thing in the Greek text that would warrant such a move. Maybe they've seen too many barns and billboards. But whatever the reason, it tempts the rest of us to make the same mistake. So end of rant and back to the story, which is where this verse lives, in a story of an encounter between Jesus and a specific human being. And if we know the Gospel of John, we know that this is also intended to be the story of an encounter with each of us, with every seeker who is coming to Jesus to ask if he's the real deal, if he's really and truly the way to the kind of life that is real life. because my sermon about this text will not be true to this text unless it makes it clear that the invitation is to you and to me to encounter Jesus and to make a decision and to live our lives in some new way as a result of that decision. You'll see that Jesus is both talking about himself and the message of love he brings, and also trying to make his hearers understand that he actually is the message in himself. He's both the bearer of God's message of love for the world and himself the means by which that love is offered. So here's the setup story to the place where our lectionary editors plop us midstream this morning. What's happening here is a frequent pattern in the fourth gospel in John. There's some event, in this case a conversation, and then Jesus launches into a wider commentary about who God is and what God is like. Sort of a theological reflection on the thing that's just happened. In this case, our passage is part of a conversation with Nicodemus, a Pharisee and leader of the Jewish people. He's heard the stories about Jesus, about the signs he's been doing, and he feels drawn to check things out for himself. So he pitches up late one night after darkness has set in. And here it helps to know that in the Gospel of John, darkness or night always symbolize separation from the presence of God. Sometimes you'll hear it said that it symbolizes unbelief, belief versus unbelief. And they are phrases that will soon be part of what Jesus is teaching about this morning. But as we'll see, you can only understand what he's saying if you understand that in John, belief means an active, trusting, experiential understanding of God, a relationship with the living person of Jesus. And as is also frequent in John, the conversation with Jesus begins with one kind of question and moves to larger and larger things. The fourth evangelist, the writer of the Gospel of John, often uses irony to point up the truth of our limited human understanding. And this story is no exception. "Rabbi," says Nicodemus, "we know you're a teacher who comes from God." So far, so good. "For no one," he continues, "can do these signs that you do apart from the presence of God." And there's where his troubles begin. Because in John, the signs Jesus does are events meant to show who he is, how God is, meant to invite people to take a look and realize that they're being invited to see. But John makes it clear, as New Testament scholar Gail O'Day points out, that Jesus will never entrust himself to people whose faith is based merely on signs. It's not the signs that are the thing, it's himself. O'Day points out that Nicodemus also gets himself in trouble with his limited understanding about what is and isn't possible with God. His imagination doesn't range widely enough. "You must be born again," says Jesus. And that verse simply doesn't work in the English language. The word translated born again means both born again and born from above, not one or the other. To be born anothen is both about the time of birth, again, and about the place from which the birth has its source, where it's generated, above. But Nicodemus can't see it. He can only start imagining a grown man crawling back into his mother's womb. Jesus is using ambiguous language, not by accident, but by intent. He wants to draw Nicodemus in, to make him dig deeper, make him take a closer look. And by extension, John is asking you and me to do the same thing. What about our own categories of what God can and can't do? What about the offer of a radical new life that is being made here? Are we ready to accept it? Because everything is at stake in how we respond to the offer. That's really what the next part, the part where we pick up today, is all about. God loved the world, and so God came into the world to show us truth, to give us the means by which to truly live. And that means is me, Jesus is saying. You have to decide. I came in love, with love, for love, because God wants the whole creation to live. But you have to decide. Will you trust me with everything? Will you decide finally that you can't save yourself? That the places where you're trying to secure your life will never work? All the language here about light and dark and belief and unbelief are images about life lived in the full presence of God and life not lived there. It's what Jesus in John means by the phrase, the world. The world is human life as it's lived apart from God. And belief is life lived in relationship with God. A relationship that says, I get it. I get it now. You're the only place that real life exists. I can't find it anywhere else. I finally understand, God, that you're the only place where my love and trust will never be disappointed. And here's another thing that's important to understand about John's language. Eternal life doesn't mean later, in the hereafter, in the sweet by and by, as a place where punishment has safely been avoided. It means life lived in the full presence of God, now, in this life, in our very earth-bound, time-bound human lives, the place of the incarnation, just as John has said back at the very beginning of his gospel. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. What Jesus wants Nicodemus to know, what he wants us to know, is that we need to choose. Jesus is the source of everything we need. In fact, the only source of everything we truly need. And the judgment that is spoken of in this passage is not judgment as in, now you're in for it, wait for the punishment. It's judgment as in moment of decision. The word here is the same as the word crisis. Because, as we are always reminded in Lent, life with God is always about choosing. Choosing to trust, choosing to turn back, choosing to realize that we have misplaced our trust and now have a chance to make a change. So listen to Jesus as he asks you this morning, do you believe in me? Which means at rock bottom, do you trust me? Will you live your life as if you know I am the only source of the source of the only love that will save you? Will you, beloved child of God, place your whole life in my hands? Let your old self die and let a new life get started. It will be hard. Some things will have to go because you can't trust me and the things of this world. It's one or the other. I hope, says Jesus, you'll choose me because I am where new life, true life, resurrection life is to be found. Amen.